So, guys, this is actually part three of the series. So, for the others, I'll cover the other two parts. This is kind of a demo sessions. Later, I'll cover all these topics in detail. But for today's, I have planned these topics. Like they are no related to the other two sessions, so do not worry. If there is a need to discuss any of those, I'll cover them again here. Okay. So the agenda for today is covering this RBAC. Then how do we create users in Azure? Then I'll have a short demo on how RBAC works. Then well, let's log in with the new users that we have created, and let's see how the UI appears to them. How do we give permissions to them? And what is Azure AD authentication and how does it works in reality? Okay. So these things let's try to cover today. All right. So this orb, I hope my audio is clear to all of you. You can stop me in the middle if you have any questions or if my voice is not clear. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so what is an RBAC? So RBAC is called a rollback access control. So it's a security feature in Azure. It's a very important concept in Azure. So using this, you assign accesses to different resources that you launch in Azure. Okay. So in Azure, every service that you launch is called a resource. So it can be either a virtual machine, it can be your Azure Data Factory or Azure Databricks or any other service that you launch is called a resource. Okay. To each of the resources, whom do you want to give the access and what level of access each one should have? So this is called access management, and this access management in Azure happens through some process called RBAC, which is called rollback access control. Okay, so what actually happens in RBAC is, first you define the role. Role is nothing but a set of permissions that a user should have to a particular resource. Let's suppose you have data factory. So to the data factory, a certain resource called Arun. Okay. So this Arun, what all permissions should you have? Should you have only reader access, or should you have read, write, and contributor access, or entire owner access? So what level of access that he should have is defined on based on the role. Okay. And Azure has built-in roles and custom roles. So it comes with like a huge number of built-in roles. You can choose if that built-in role suits your requirement. There will be built-in role called database admin. And if you are intending to give the user database admin permission, you can choose that built-in role. Or if you want separate set of permissions to be given to him, you can create your own custom roles. Okay. So basically the RBAC is a combination of these three steps. It is like giving proper role to proper user and defining the correct scope. So if you combine these three steps, it's like you have configured RBAC to that particular resource. Okay. So I'll show this to you in demo, so and it will be more clear when I go to demo. So roles, as I said, there will be two kind of roles, built-in and custom, and you can choose from those roles. And when it comes to who you are giving the access to, basically in Azure we call it security principal. Okay, you assign any particular role to security principal. That security principal is nothing but user or group or application or some say service principal. Application or service principal, both are same. Okay. So when you are assigning a role, you assign that role either to a user. It can be a user like Ashok or Arun or anyone, or it can be a group like dev team or test team or DevOps team, like that. It can be a group, and group again will have list of users. Okay, it can be user, it can be group, or it can be a service principal. Service principal is like an application. Like let's suppose you, your SQL server should be accessed by Azure Data Factory. Now Azure Data Factory should have access on SQL Server. It is not a user or a group. It's another application. Okay. So now, This security principle is a combination of three things: user, group, or security principle. Okay. Now, when you are done with these two things, then the scope, then comes the scope. Now, whatever role and the user that you have chosen, he should have access on which things. Like when I say scope, it's like there is a hierarchy that I discussed in the previous session. Let me quickly hover to that slide. So here, if you look, this is how the hierarchy is defined in Azure. Okay. So if I enlarge my screen, so first comes your resources at the bottom, then your resource group, then subscriptions, then management group. It's like if you give any role at resource group level, so all those roles will be inherited by the resources within that resource group. It's like top to bottom hierarchy. So if you are assigning any role at resource group level, it will be inherited by all the resources. Similarly, if you give any role assignment at subscription level, so that role assignment will happen to all the resource groups within that subscription, and in turn to all the resources within those resource groups. Okay, if these terms are confusing to you, do not worry much. I'll again discuss this all in detail. So resource group is nothing but a logical grouping of resources, and if you have like multiple resource groups will come under some single subscription. Subscription is a billing, basic billing unit under which the billing happens in Azure. All right. So I'll come to this again in detail in later sessions. So basically, Azure is nothing but these three steps. If you are done with these three steps, you have configured Azure for that particular resource, assigning a proper, giving proper role, choosing the user to whom you want to give, and assigning the scope. Whether that scope is only for that resource or for that entire resource group or to the entire subscription. Okay. So the same thing is being spoken here. So Azure RBAC is authorization system built on ARM. So it's designed for fine-grained access management of Azure resources. And Azure, this RBAC is a combination of three steps: role definition, security principle, and defining the scope. And these are hierarchical in nature. As I said, management groups comes at the top, then subscription, resource group, and resources. We have both built-in and custom roles. All right. So let's see how the process flow happens in an RBAC. Okay. So let me enlarge the screen. I'm sorry. Okay. So if you look at this flow chart, so the RBAC flow happens in this way. It starts with no. Okay. So the resource manager or that particular resource, it will start its decision whether to give a particular user permission or not starts with no. Okay. It will initially start with no. Then it will retrieve all the permissions that are there for that particular user. Let's suppose now Ashok is trying to log in into Azure Data Factory. Now, first Azure Data Factory will check what all permissions that this Ashok has on the Azure Data Factory. Azure Ashok can have only read permission, or he can have contributor role. Okay, first it will retrieve the roles or assignments that are there. Okay, then there is something called deny assignments. Okay, it will overwrite all these things. So if there is any deny assignment, let's suppose I want to deny Ashok access on this resource. If that is being set, then then access is blocked. Okay, if there is no explicit deny, then it will go down further down and evaluate whether there are proper roles or not, and then it will check uh, if it is in the right scope or not. Let's suppose he is given access at the resource level, and now you are checking at the resource group level to the entire resource group. Resource group is above resources, right? So he will not have access to the resource group. So that scope it will check. Okay, you will understand this once the demo is done. So now let's move to demo. Okay, then after that we can come back to here. Okay, so um, you can I want this to be interactive, guys. Like if you are understanding, say yes. If it's not clear, say no. You say something. Okay. So what I'll do, let me create a new resource and try to do this RBAC on that resource. Okay. I'm trying to create a new resource group. So let me create that new resource group and let me give a name like um, RG Ashok. Okay. I'm just giving this name. I'm creating a resource group called Ashok. Okay. Subscription is free trial subscription. Resource group is name is RG Ashok. Like how many of you are familiar with these things? Already know all these subscriptions, resource groups, and all. Do we have anyone here who know all these things before, or is it new to everyone?
Not
Yes.
of not.
Okay, I think everyone is fairly new. So, all right. So, but this topic needs at least certain knowledge on these things. The basics I have covered in first two sessions, but I'll try to cover even basics here so that you understand at least this topic. Okay, I'll not go in detail, but at least I'll try to cover. Okay. So, resource group is actually it's a logical grouping of resources. So whatever resource you create in Azure should be under one resource group. Okay, you cannot have a standalone resource. And the advantage of creating resource groups is you can give the accesses at the resource group level so that that particular user have access at all the resources. You need not individually go to each resource and give access. Let's suppose there is a team called development team. Okay, some project data lake development team, and under the data lake development team you have some 50 resources in the sense 50 services or 50 applications. Okay, now if you want to give access to a particular user on those all 50 services, you need not go to individual resource and give. You can give access at the resource group level so that that permission is inherited by all other resources. Okay, so access management becomes easy if you have resource groups. That's the reason we have resource groups. Okay, and if you want to delete also, at a time you can delete all these 50 resources if you delete that resource group. So even managing the different services is easy, managing the access to the services is easy. So for all these reasons, we go with resource groups. Okay, so now my resource group is in East US. Okay, I'm launching this resource group in East US. This is the region where this resource group will be created physically. Physically, it will be located in East US. All right. So I'm just giving review and create. So it's creating a resource group for me. Resource group name is RG and hyphen Ashok. All right. It takes some time. Validations have passed. Now within few minutes, yeah, it's done. It's so fast. As you can see, it's so fast. So now we have resource group called RG underscore hyphen Ashok. This is a new resource group that I just created. Now to this resource group, how do you give RBAC? RBAC is rollback access assignment. So go to IAM. So here in this resource group, towards your left hand side, you see this. This is called they call it differently. It's called I call it navigation pane. Okay, you come here and come to access control because from here you navigate to different options. So here you come to access control. Access control is where you assign the RBAC. Okay. Now, so let us add a particular user certain roles and let's define the scope. That is what I said is RBAC, right? So let's do all those three steps here. So what I'm doing, I'm adding a new role assignment. Okay. What is the role that I wanted to give to this particular user on this resource group? On this RG Ashok, I wanted only reader access. Okay, I wanted only reader access. Then to whom you want the reader access? Okay, so assign access to user group or service principal, and I want to assign access to a user. Okay, let me select the user demo user. This is the demo user that I just created. So I'm choosing demo user. Now select. Now what is happening is this demo user is getting the read access on this resource group which I just now created. And you can see the scope here. The scope is at the resource group level. If you can see the scope here, so the bottommost is the where you are defining the scope. So scope is at the resource group level. If you give at the resource I'm a subscription level, you can give at the resource level. Now we are in the resource group, so at the resource group level we are giving scope. Now under this resource group I can create so many resources. So this particular demo user will indirectly get read access on all those resources. Okay, so review and create I clicked, so it is adding a new role to the resource group. Now, if I come to role assignments, so this particular resource group has demo user as as a role in it, okay, and then it has a reader role. Scope is this resource. So on this resource, this user has reader role. So this is nothing but RBAC. These three things: scope, role, and name. These three combines RBAC. Okay. And while explaining, I said something called deny assignments. In the flow chart, I told, right, if there is any deny assignment, first it will block the access there itself. So if you want to explicitly deny assignment to certain users, you can set it here. All right. Now this is how you set up the RBAC. Now if I log in with the user demo user, I should have read access only to this resource group. I will not be able to see all these resource groups. I'll see only this resource group. Okay, let me try to do that. So I'll go to demo user. I'm logging it with demo user now. So and let's see what demo user will see. Okay, next. Sorry, I should have skipped it back. Okay, I'll log in again because what happened is skip now for because we need to set up MFA multi-factor authentication. So that's going to take some time. So I'm not doing it. So if you look at the user is demo user. Now this demo user should have read access on the new resource group that we just created, which is RG underscore Ashok. If you look at this resource group, we have RG underscore Ashok. In the main user, there were so many extra resources, but you do not see all these things here because you have given only access on these three resource groups, not all resource groups. And if you come here, you have only read access. Okay, you can only look at the different resources here. You can only read the data in different resources here, but you cannot do anything else. Okay, all right. So that is about RBAC, assigning roles and all. So now let me again switch back to my user, my admin user. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to cover is um, the creating users in Azure. Okay, so now this is my main login ID, admin login ID through
Altaf have a
which,
small doubt.
yeah,
Hello, I'm
yes,
audible.
yes.
Altaf has small doubt.
Hmm.
See, once we are giving any role-based access for that particular resource group,
Hmm.
I'm thinking like it's a kind of drawback. If some like developer deleted that by mistake, that resource group, so all the resources under that particular resource group will lose the access, right?
Right.
Will it happen or
No, yeah, that happens, but that's the reason we give least permissions which are required for that user. If you do not want that user to give that delete access,
okay,
you can restrict that access because that's the reason you have I mean, there is a lot many number of roles available in Azure, built-in roles.
okay,
Okay, there you can give only the roles that are needed for that user. You do not have only some four or five kind of roles. You have more than 100 built-in roles itself. And still you can
okay,
create custom roles and give whatever roles you wanted to. Because that even that deleting that entire resource group is one of the requirement once the project completes. Someone should have that access. And that
So you
access
mean to
will
say
be
that, you mean to say that particular resource uh, like expire his particular access once he left the project, right?
That's it. Generally how it happens is, let's suppose there is a development project which will end complete in one year. Okay.
Yeah.
Once that year is completed, all your resources will be in prod and prod will be in running. Dev, QA, sit, everything which you have created are no longer required.
Yes.
So when you want to delete it, because you have to delete it, otherwise you have to pay for the services that you are using, right? So you have to delete it. So when you delete it, so it will be easier if you logically group all the resources under one resource group. Okay,
Correct.
so that you delete that resource group at once and you should be good to go. Like all are deleted now. Okay,
Okay.
for the ease of access management and for the ease of managing the resources, we create these resource groups.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks for asking that. And as I told, like I'll show you like what again I'll come to that roles and I'll show you what all roles are available. All right. So I'm again back with my primary user, which is my login ID. Yeah, I think before you start there, you need to understand this portal and everything. Um, I mean, I'll share those PPTs with you. You go through them, then you should be able to understand those things. Else, I have a detailed classes again. We'll cover those two sessions again. All right. So let me go to users now. I mean, this is the home page in Azure, and whatever services or whatever you wanted to go, you can go either from this navigation pane or you can type it here and go there. Okay. What I'm trying to create now is I'm trying to create a new user and see how do I assign permissions to that user. Now I gave demo user permission on resource group Ashok, right? RG Ashok I gave, right? So how did I create this demo user at first place? So that I'm trying to demo now, give you demo now. So let me create a new resource group and let me call it um, let me call it Raghava. Okay, Raghava. Okay, this is a new user that I just created. Okay, he will have this as his email ID or logon ID. Raghava at the rate of my ID, Sayed Azure, this thing. Okay, okay, and these are optional, and I'll leave it. So now I'm creating a new user called Raghava. Okay, now if I go to Raghava and if I check what roles he has, there are no roles to this Raghava, and in the sense we haven't assigned any roles to Raghava yet. Okay, on any resources. Okay, first let me go to profile and set the password for to him. This is how generally admins do. Whenever a new person joins the team, they create user, that user. Let's suppose now some XYZ person has joined, they create a user called XYZ and they'll set the password and share those logon details with that user. Now this is the temporary password. Okay, okay, and the logon ID is this. Using this logon ID and password, you should be able to log in as a new user. Okay, so now user is created. Now let's open a new browser and try to log in into Azure portal using the new user that we just created. This is my user ID. So add a new user ID, next, and the password. So this is the password. So first time you have to reset your password. That's the general security principle um, imposed by Azure. So we have to do that. Okay. Now I have reset the password and and I'm able to log in now. See now, I could log in with Raghava as the user. Okay. and I cannot do anything here because I do not have access. I'm not given access to any of the resources, right? If you come here, you cannot any resource you click, your just profile is created. You do not have any access, so you will not be able to do anything. Whichever resource you click, you come back to here. It will ask you either to pick up any of the subscriptions. Okay, so user is created. Now let us go to my main login ID and give access to few of the resources to this user. I'll go to SQL Server. Okay, let's not go to SQL Server. I'll go to storage account. Did I create any storage account? Let me check if I have any storage accounts. Yeah, there is a storage account. All right. So in this storage account, I'll go to IAM, and here I'll again do the RBAC to the user Raghava, which I just created. Okay, I'm going here. I'll give owner access to Raghava. This is the new user that I just created, and I'm like with the final steps, review and assign. So I'm assigning that role. Once this role assignment is complete, you can go back to your user, Raghava user, and there you can now see this new storage account. Here, if you come here, please provide below info. What is it saying? An error occurred while trying to fetch resource additional details for underlying. Please. Okay. Oh, see, sorry. It just took some time. Okay. Now we under Raghava user, you are able to see that resource group. Previously, there was no resource group available because there was no proper role assignment that has done to that user. Now you have this. Now you can because you have owner permission on it, you can do everything here. You can create containers here, you can upload any files here, or you can delete any files here. Everything you can do. Okay. This is how you create user and give assign roles to that particular user. Okay, is this topic clear? Now if I go to this storage account, and if I come to IAM, and if I get the role assignments, now you can see Raghava has a owner permission on this resource, and you can log in with Raghava and you can see that storage account here. Okay, what is storage account and all these things, you will learn in the next classes. In these classes, I'm just demoing this security features. How do you set up this users? How do you give permissions to different users and all? So that I'm trying to cover. All right. So now the next thing that I planned is Azure AD authentication. AD authentication is Azure Active Directory authentication. So So this you might be actually using in all of your organizations. You'd have observed that if you log in into any of your, I mean, let's suppose if you are logged in into your Outlook, okay, with your Microsoft account, you have logged in into your Outlook. And once you are logged into Outlook, and if you try to open any of the other Microsoft tools like the your Excel or PowerPoint and all other those Microsoft Office tools, it will not prompt you for entering the username and password. It will use the single sign-on and it will authenticate you to use those services. Okay, those services which you are using Azure, in the Excel, PowerPoint and all, they are not installed on your system. They are available online only. You should actually log in into those services to use them. But still, as you are already logged into your Outlook 365, it will not ask you to enter username and password to all of those services because single sign-on is enabled in your on your system. So what is single sign-on is, so whenever you log into your Office 365 account, so that single login is used to authenticate all the services which are having trust relationship on that Active Directory. There will be something called Active Directory. So whenever you log into any of these services, you are basically logging into an Active Directory. Okay. Once you have successfully logged into Active Directory, now all the resources that you wanted to launch will talk to the Active Directory and authenticate from there. They will not ask user to enter the username and password. Okay, let's go a little deeper into it, how it happens, and try to understand a little more technically. Okay, that is generic example just I told. So generally how it happens is, let's suppose you will have client and server. Let's take an example of I believe like I think most of you know in SQL Server. Let's take SQL Server, simple example. Okay, you will have SQL, any client for that matter. It can be SSMS, Server Management Studio, or it can be your Toad, or it can be any other front-end client from where you wanted to connect to server. Okay, so how do you connect from server to the client? You enter your username and password. So that username and password will go to the server. Server will validate whether this user should have access or not, and whether that password which he has given is right or not. Sometimes even the password will be right, but he will not have access to the database, so he will not get. So these two things should match. He should have access to the database, and that password which he is entering should be the right password. So these two things server will check. Then it will allow this client to connect to the server. This is how currently the process is happening. Okay. So what is the problem with this is, let's suppose you are having multiple clients. Let's suppose for one particular project you need to use multiple things. SQL Server is not enough. You might need one ETL tool, you might need one scheduling tool, you might need some Unix environment, you might need many other logins. You should have that many logins and that many passwords. It's very difficult to manage them because you have keeping security in view, you have to change them frequently. Okay, for this reason you have to remember so many passwords and usernames, and the admin teams also have this database stored somewhere. If something happens to that database, all the users will lose access to those servers. So it's a very cumbersome process. Okay, to simplify that, Azure has come up with something called Azure Active Directory Authentication, Azure AD authentication. So what is the difference is, as I told before, so whatever are the services that you wanted to connect, servers that you wanted to connect, they do not directly take the username and password from the client. Okay, they authenticate using the Azure AD. So what happens is, this client initially will log in into Azure AD. Okay, once he is logging into Azure AD successfully, his work is done. Now he has logged into Azure AD successfully, his work is done. Now if you have 100 resources, those all 100 resources will have access to Azure AD directly. They talk to Azure AD and verify if this client is right client or not. I mean, they'll basically verify if he was successfully able to log in into Azure AD or not. If he was able to log in into Azure AD, then I'll allow him to log in even into my environment. That is how the resources will do. So now this client need not remember all logon IDs to all these 100 users. He will just, it is enough if he just remember logon ID to Azure AD. What happens is, this particular user, okay, he tries to log on into any service, he directly will not go to service. He first go to Azure AD, get a token from there. He will not get username and password. He go to Azure AD. Okay. Once he log in into Azure AD, Azure AD will give some token to him. Using that token, it will try to connect to SQL Server. Then SQL Server will take this token and go to Azure AD and verify whether this token was issued by AD or not, Azure AD or not. If it gets satisfied that this is the right token that is issued by Azure AD, it will allow it to log in. So here user will not do all these things. User will just enter username and password into Azure AD client. So all these things will happen in backend. So what happens is Azure AD issues will token. That token will go to SQL Server. SQL Server will again go to Azure AD and verify whether this token which client is sending is the right token that is issued by the Azure AD or not. If it verifies that, then it will allow this user to log in. Okay. Now you need not remember all those usernames and passwords. With single username and password, you will be able to log in into all these resources. So that is what called Azure AD. And many of the resources that we create support this Azure AD authentication, Azure Active Directory authentication. It is called AAD authentication. So when you have this AAD authentication enabled, without username and password, you will be able to logging into your servers. All right. So let's see this thing also in reality, in practice, how it works. Okay. Any questions before I go there? Um, can you confirm if you're able to hear me?
No, no.
All right. Thanks. All right. Yeah, I understand these are new things, and you at least have to try once to understand, I mean, to get questions and all. When you try to do it, I'm sure you will get so many questions. But as these things are new to you, you will not have any questions right now. Okay. So this is a SQL Server that I already have created. Now let's go to um, Azure Active Directory. Okay. Now, okay. So, so how do I log into the SQL databases? All right. Okay. I'll do something. I'll quickly create a new server for you. Just bear with me. It just takes a few minutes. You will also learn how do you launch server. Okay. So the main advantage of this cloud is just little going little back. So the main advantage of any cloud service is, so whatever services that you want, you can launch them in no time with very less settings. You need not, I mean, with a very less low cost also. Okay, if you have to launch a SQL server before in your on-premises service, on-premise, it would have took so much time and so much cost and so much effort. All these three things can be avoided if you go for cloud providers. And that you can see in practical here. So I'm trying to launch a new SQL Server database. I'll launch it inside this Ashok RG which I newly created. I'll give the server name as let me give Ashok uh, Dev. Okay, yeah, it's available. Ashok Dev as the server name. Location is this. Okay, location in East US. So to this server, what kind of authentication you wanted to use? Okay, use SQL authentic. This is what I wanted to demonstrate. So to log in into this server, what authentication you wanted to use? Use only SQL authentication, use only Azure AD authentication, or use both SQL and Azure AD authentication. Okay, let me go with the last option. I wanted to show you how these two things work. Okay, now to the Azure to configure this Azure AD, who is the admin for the Azure AD? I'll set the admin to the newly created account Raghava. So he is the admin for this Azure AD. Okay. Now, what is the logon ID? So logon ID will be, let's suppose Ashok admin. Okay. This is my logon password. Because I am launching a server now, I need to set all these things to be able to use it in future. Now I am launching the server now. So networking. So all these things I'll keep defaults. I'll not change anything. Review and create. So I'm creating a new SQL server now. Okay. SQL server name is Ashok Dev. These are little complex topics only to understand, but these are important, so I'm saying it. Basically, what I'm trying to cover in this course is like for data engineering, what is primarily required. So that is my focus in this training. This is not a very important topic for data engineers. This is basically for security guys, admin guys. But still, as these are important, I am just trying to cover. So the main focus that I'll be doing on is Azure Data Factory and Azure Data Bricks and Azure Key Vault and Azure Logic Apps. So these four things will be my main topics. So I'll come to them little while. So in the beginning, I'm covering all these topics so that later we do not have any confusions. Okay, even if you do not understand these topics, it is okay because this is not the primary focus for Azure Data Engineer. Okay, all those roles and all. So is actually not done in reality by the developer. That is done by the your team lead or the managers. Okay, good if you know it, and if you do not understand it, that's okay. Do not worry. Okay, as you can see, it is creating that server for you. It is saying deployment is in progress. It takes few minutes. It's done. Now you have a brand new server created. Ashok Dev is a server that is created. Now, to log in into this server, you have set two authentication types, either using the username and password, SQL Server authentication, or using Azure AD authentication. All right. Now, let me create a database under this. Okay. So the server I have created, server is the compute power. Now storage power I'll create a database under this. So there are no databases. Okay, I'll create a new database here. You know these two things, server and database, like you should be knowing it. If you are into IT industry from some time, you should know server and database. So database I'm creating now. Ashok DB is the database. Okay, server name is Ashok Dev. So, and what is the storage and capacity that you want for this database? I will go with the least option that is available here. So I don't want to be overcharged for this. So basic I'm going with. I'll be charged 351 rupees per month if I launch this service. Okay, I'll go with LRS. So this also I'll tell you in detail what is LRS, ZRS, GRS and all. I have already covered in previous sessions, but I'll come to that again when I start afresh. Okay. So other things I'll keep default. Then I'll launch the database. Now here you can see this is the cost. I'll be like 352 rupees is what I'll be charged per month for using this database. Okay, now this database is being provisioned. So let's wait. Okay, so all right. Yeah, it won't take more time. It's in progress. Let that provision and meanwhile I will go to the SQL Server. So meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, if not on the topic, any general questions like what will be covered, who is it meant for, all those things. Also, if you want, you can ask. Do I have any questions here? All right. So yeah, this still deployment is in progress. This is going to take some time. Actually, these resources I'm launching in East US, right? So location you can choose any nearer location also. That's actually recommended practice. I'm just using it as this was default setting. Okay, we can choose something like South India also. There is a region called South India. You can choose that. So your services will be launched nearer to your location. So you will have less latency. Okay, you need not connect to servers which are there far from you. All right. Ashok Dev, I'm going. So this is in this database is SQL databases, Ashok DB, and I'll try to log into this database. Okay. So when I try to log into this database, I'm asked these two things. I can Ashok admin I can give, password I can give. Shift E. It will ask you to whitelist the IP. Let me whitelist it, and I should be able to log in. Now I am logged into Ashok DB. Ashok Dev is my server name. Ashok DB is my database name. Okay, now I could log in using my username and password, which is Ashok Dev and my password. Now, how do I use Azure AD authentication so that I avoid this login process? Okay, I now logged in using my username and password. I do not want to do that. Okay, so for this database, while creating, I gave Raghava as my admin, right? So if I logged in with the user Raghava, then I should not be asked to. So if I continue, this is Azure Active Directory Authentication, which is nothing but Azure AD authentication. AD stands for Active Directory. Okay. So if I continue with Syed, I will not be able to because I am not the admin here. Okay. But Raghava was the admin. What I'll do is I'll switch user to Raghava. Okay. I have shift function. Now I have changed my user from Syed, Syed to Raghava. Now if I go to SQL database, give me a minute. I am not seeing that there. Whether did I not give? I'll go it. Okay. I'll go to IAM on this first. Server, SQL servers, Ashok Dev DB, Ashok Dev, IAM. I'll give add role assignment, owner role to Raghava. And then Azure Active Directory, who is Raghava is set as the admin. Now if I change the user to Raghava, escape this. I think it takes some time to reflect or something. I am not sure. I should see that SQL DB here. Why am I not seeing it? Let me change it to demo user. Sometimes there'll be some delay in giving this permissions to this. So okay, all right. So I'm here, not SQL Server. I think the other one. Show Active Directory. Mhm. Set admin. Set to demo user. Save. Now I'll go to SQL databases. I'll go to Sayada query editor. All right. Now, see, see, this is what I was trying to explain you guys. So now I have set demo user as my Azure AD admin. Okay. So when this Azure AD is enabled, uh, I will not be prompted to ask to enter my username and password. Okay, because I'm logging into Azure AD with my username and password. Okay, so and my client, basically my SQL DB, will talk to Azure AD and check if I'm the right user or not, and then let me log in here. Okay, it will not ask me to enter username and password. Here it is asking because I have given two methods of authentication. I asked it while launching this server, I told it to log in either using SQL Server authentication or using Azure Active Directory. Okay. Now I did not enter my username and password. If I just give demo login here, I am able to log in. So this way, this Active Directory authentication, you can configure on any number of resources, and those resources need not log in into individual resource. If they log in into Azure AD directory, it is sufficient, and they should be allowed to log in into all the resources. Okay, is this thing clear? I mean, at least what I explained, were you able to look in reality here? This is what I planned for today. Yeah, that is what. See, now you will not directly, this client will talk to Azure AD, and Azure AD will in turn let you log in into these resources. You will not pass username and password. That is what exactly happening here. All right. Any questions, guys? Meeting also will end in few minutes. So before that, I want you guys to talk. You can unmute and talk. Okay, Pradeep is not there.
No doubt, but bit confusion, Altaf. Might be initial, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. Right, right.
Hmm. Because it's AD authentication and resources, all those things like known terminology. But once you comes in hands-on, might be we will face so many
Mm, mm,
issues and questions.
right. So I encourage you guys to create your Azure accounts, because if you are serious to learn and create career as Azure data engineer, this is your starting point. You should start creating your resources, start exploring the tool basically. Okay. So what I try to cover
It's open
is
source, right? Altaf,
it,
sorry to interrupt.
it's an open source. You get free account, like I don't say it's an open source. You get free subscription for first 1 month. Okay,
Okay.
in that 1 month, if you get familiarized with the services, then you have to properly launch only free services or the services which cost less for you. Okay, else what happens is you will get monthly bill which is huge. If you properly manage the services, you should get zero billing. Okay, if you properly launch the services, similar to AWS and GCP and all, here also like you need to pay for the service. um, that's what, for 1 month you get free account. Okay, so
Which you explained till now, Altaf, it seems look like VMware, right? VMware also same because 8 years back I have uh, I tried to learn VMware. That time I had all these terminology like virtual machine, all those things.
yeah, yes, see, this Azure, whatever cloud providers you take, okay, they provide you all these things. If you have attended my previous session, like there is something called IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. Okay, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. When you say infrastructure as a service, it's like providing VMs only. Inside VMs, uh, did the meeting end? No, right? Inside VMs, you can launch whatever service you want, and then you can do. It will be like VM for you. Okay, it's actually superset of VMs. Uh, Along with IaaS, you have PaaS, SaaS also. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, okay, I know this was little complex to understand because even I did not know these things before, but I learned these things because these are being these are very important things and these are asked in few of the examinations. Okay. Hmm. All right, guys. This is what I plan for today. So I'll send invite for tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll plan what contents to be covered. Tomorrow will be relatively easy. These were little complex topics. So I'll soon start ADF Azure Data Factory, which is a core thing of your Azure Data Engineering role. Okay, Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks. These two are core things. Okay.
Okay, Piyush.
All right, guys. If you have any questions, I can take up. Else, meeting also will end in some time. This is only for 1 hour. I scheduled this for 1 hour. I think it should also end in some time.